when we look at the entirety of the intelligence that we have to this date, it concludes that these strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities were absolutely successful. It was a total obliteration, as the president said. And not only does our own intelligence say that, but also the Iranian foreign minister has said that. We saw Israel conclude the same thing based on their own intelligence. We also had the United Nations say that as well. So I think the only other time the United Nations, Israel, Iran, and the United States has agreed on something is that the sky is blue, but they all agree that Iran's nuclear facilities were completely demolished.
Welcome to this 2:30 edition of The Absolute Truth, focusing on two briefings today, both at the White House and the Pentagon. Caroline Leavitt took a calm, more measured approach in her briefing today, explaining how intelligence works, that it is essentially a consensus of different intelligence reports. But Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth giving a much more passionate rebuttal of the leaked intelligence that made its way into a CNN report by Natasha Bertrand.
Because you, and I mean specifically you, the press, specifically you, the press corps, because you cheer against Trump so hard, it's like in your DNA and in your blood to cheer against Trump, because you want him not to be successful so bad, you have to cheer against the efficacy of these strikes. You have to hope maybe they weren't effective. Maybe the way the Trump administration has represented them isn't true. So let's take half-truths, spun information, leaked information, and then spin it in every way we can to try to cause doubt and manipulate the public mind over whether or not our brave pilots were successful.
Secretary Hegseth was on a roll, like I said, very passionate, sounding off against suspected leakers and also the journalist who reported on the intelligence provided. Here he is battling. He also battled his former colleague, Jennifer Griffith, over at the Defense Department as well, his former Fox News colleague, talking about the airstrikes against Iranian nuclear weapons facilities. Listen to that.
Highly enriched uranium. Do you have certainty that all the highly enriched uranium was inside the Fordo Mountain, or some of it, because there were satellite photos that showed more than a dozen trucks there 2 days in advance? Are you certain none of that highly enriched uranium was moved?
Of course, we're watching every single aspect, but Jennifer, you've been about the worst, the one who misrepresents the most intentionally what the president says. I'm familiar.
So both the White House and the Pentagon adamantly pushing back on these reports in the press. The Secretary of Defense giving personal attacks there based on these leaked DIA assessments. Now, what did that assessment say? It claims that the B-2 strikes on Iran were not as successful as the White House would have everyone believe. Leavitt did confirm that there is an FBI investigation into the suspected leakers and any journalist who publishes the material. Joining us now is our guest who has felt the ire of the Pentagon's rough treatment of journalists assigned to cover the building. So she's going to help us understand whether Hegseth and the rest of the administration are overreacting, or if this is a legitimate display of contempt by the administration towards the press. Welcome to the show, Gabrielle Kachia. She's a former OAM Pentagon reporter. She's also the author of Gabrielle's Substack that documents her time in Washington and has some pretty interesting breaking news, such as the Biden Autopen scandal that we will be talking about just a little bit later on in this half hour. It's good to see you, Gabrielle.
Emerald, thank you for having me. Of course, I'd like to celebrate some wins, but it looks pretty rough at the Pentagon, at least in that short clip that you just showed. So ready to break it down when you are.
Yeah, well, look, this is what Brandon Weichert and I talked about this a little bit earlier today, and I think Caroline's approach was the better communications approach in saying, look, there's all kinds of intelligence assessments in the government, and you could point to the Chinese interference information that the FBI has now released to Chuck Grassley. Remember that? Back in 2020, when there was an assessment that China had interfered in the election, and then other intelligence, professionals, quote
Yeah.
unquote, suggested that that wasn't true. So you're going to get dissenting intelligence. Now, that was also subterfuge in that case. So maybe that's not the best example. But you are going to get different intelligence assessments. And as someone, you're very familiar with the intelligence process as well. It's
Yeah.
all put together and you make your assessment, your general consensus from all these different assessments. And that's sort
Yeah,
of how
absolutely.
Caroline laid it out.
Hmm.
Pete took a very interesting approach in his attacks on the media. And I believe it has something to do with the position he finds himself at the Department of Defense. Can you shed any light on what you know about the Pentagon that led to his interesting briefing?
Yeah, absolutely. Even prior to all of this happening, right? Whether or not this was going to be a leaked memo or a leaked piece of information, I would like to just bring us all back down to memory lane. As you mentioned, Emerald, and thanks again for having me, is that I worked in the intelligence community. I can't explain exactly what I did, but I can tell you with certainty that there are a lot of IC assessment reports of which the low confidence just means that the IC and all of its elements, outside of just the CIA, the NSA, DIA, et cetera, that the low confidence at times can mean that there wasn't necessarily all facets being agreed upon across the board between all those agencies that I just mentioned and a few more. Another element to this low confidence can also be that there hasn't been enough evidence to bolster one way or the other. An example in recent history I can tell you about that Tulsi Gabbard is actually pressed on while being in DNI is that Havana syndrome was reported from the intelligence community with low confidence that it was a foreign adversary. I can tell you with certainty that there are certain agencies within the government that are spearheading the Havana syndrome investigation, and they found evidence of foreign adversaries, but still are unable to determine what the weaponry of the bioweapon of Havana syndrome looks like, where it's being created. They only know the home source. So now, with all that information still not being gathered and pieced together, again, because the IC is being stretched thin from, say, what was going on in Gaza, you talk about the Ukraine-Russia war, our hard targets of North Korea, whatever it may be, Iran in that mix as well, of course, they are stretched thin and don't have all the information yet. It takes years to collect and identify. So that's why a lot of times these assessments sit at low confidence. Surely in a situation like this, where you have a bombing on 3 nuclear sites happening, there's going to be low confidence, especially in the beginning, the days following, prior, during, after. So low confidence is pretty standard. I don't find anything necessarily wrong with this. Happens all the time. There are, say, leakers or purposeful leakers that give information to press so that the
Here,
press can relay this. I can tell you, working at the Pentagon and other entities as well, but certainly at my time at the Pentagon, I was given information, and not all information, not all leaks are bad info. I was given information that certain departments within the DoD wanted me to speak upon because they wanted it to become publicly known, for Capitol Hill to respond to it, to get maybe the eyes of, say, an Elon Musk to doge whatever program or issues that the DoD is facing, again, with that $1 trillion budget up and coming, and to expand more so because of the Iron Dome or the Golden Dome, however you want to call it. These things happen all of the time. I can tell you, I'm not surprised that this Secretary of Defense was defensive, quite literally, because this is the only second press briefing he had. I can tell you, he never had a press, not one of his press secretaries, he's on number 2 right now, has had any interaction publicly on the podium with, in a formal setting with
well,
the press corps. Go ahead, Emerald.
I was just gonna say that's what I kind of want to get to, because I think that's
Yeah.
the lesson here. I think maybe it was a little bit of an overreaction to the report.
Yes.
Look, I don't think this was as innocent of a leak like you're describing. There are those. This was leaked to Natasha Bertrand. She's the one who talked
Yeah.
about this one. She leaked she reported on the memo of the 51 intel community members who said the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. And we'll play that soundbite in just a minute from Caroline Levitt. It's a little bit long, but she did give a good overview of Natasha's history. And we all knew when I worked at the White House and when I worked there that Natasha, if she was saying it, it was because the anti-Trump faction of the intel community wanted her to say it. She is their mouthpiece. So in this case, that is who the report was given to. But I do think you make a great point about the interaction with the press overall, especially at the Pentagon, is that they have isolated themselves from even friendly reporters that they could. He talked about writing the stories about, how difficult and complex of a mission this was. And I do think that's good suggestions for stories. But most often what we see still from this administration is a catering to the corporate media, right? Like ABC, NBC, and then a more touch and go relationship with even those reporters who are friendly with them sometimes. So I think that there's a lesson for them to learn here.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I lived it. I got kicked out of the Pentagon, and and wrote about this in my Substack. I had individuals from Hegseth's team specifically, purposely don't name their names just to be nice. But they know I've said it, and I will continue to say it. I was brought in, remember, bringing us back down to memory lane. There was this huge announcement, right, that NBC is going to get kicked out, CNN is going to get kicked out, all these outlets are going to get kicked out for dishonorable, uncredible reporting, and we were going to have the likes of, say, One America News or Breitbart News or whatever it may be. As I happen to work for OAN, and was brought into the Pentagon to report on news in a way that they thought I could do in a positive light, I suppose. I've never said anything negative about the administration and specifically about the DoD. Again, like I said, I highlighted plenty of topics and information and points of contention that the administration wanted to work on and shed a light on, and I did that for them. And I was happy to, because again, it was a direct result of taxpayer dollars going exactly where we voted for them to go towards. As soon as I said where it all started is that there was information that Hegseth wouldn't be the Secretary of Defense for all 4 years. And that's pretty in pattern with any administration. If you remember, President Trump had more than one Secretary of Defense. The same thing for Biden, Obama, George Bush, you name it. And so as soon as that was said, it caught the wind of Hegseth's team. They were upset. They contacted my employer. They voiced that they were not happy with me. And then a second time around, they did it yet again. And then I was told to return my badge. Although I too continue to do my reporting and to do it fairly around the center of the DoD, and I still maintain my sources, both on the they're left leaning and right leaning. It doesn't necessarily matter. There's a truth in the middle of it all. So yeah, I've definitely been on the receiving end of it, and I still continue to be on the receiving end of it. And seeing someone like Jennifer Griffin, you can say that do you enjoy her coverage? Do you find it fair? That's up for debate. Everyone's free to discern one way or the other. But that pure question of was uranium transported prior to the strikes is a question that everyone has been asking, whether you're MAGA or you're not. And so to have that question be presented on live television and for a quick anger reaction, knee-jerk reaction, chomping at the bit, because I can tell you both parties don't like each other from the reporter end and from Hegseth's end, and that's a known within the press corps, and it's a known outside
Jennifer and Pete already didn't like each other? Okay.
Yeah.
Because they used to work at Fox together, so I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so they don't like. Oh, sorry, I thought that was a known. Yeah, they do not like each other.
Okay.
And so I bring that up I bring it up as an extra point of element that it appears.
I tend to agree with him though on her, but
Yeah, and that's right. Yeah, but that's fine. It's more of that question specifically is a fair question to ask. You can say that you don't enjoy her freedom of speech, whatever it may be. But that, again, as you made those quick comparisons between Levitt and Hegseth, I mean, Levitt on the record on the podium today answered the uranium question and answered it calmly and said, I'm confirming whether you choose to believe it or not. Yeah, I'm confirming that the uranium wasn't moved. Okay, up to the people to believe that or not. But Hegseth was unable to answer the question and just went straight fire to let Jennifer know that he doesn't like her, which is not necessarily what we're all listening in on that press conference at 8 a.m. to hear.
So I want to move on to the next topic because we're going to run out of time, and you've done great reporting on this, and that's the Autopen scandal. Caroline Levitt confirmed there was an investigation into the intel leaker, but there is still an ongoing investigation into the use of Autopen by Biden staffers, and we got an update this week because Neera Tanden, she's For those of us in DC circles, she's one of those infamous names in Democrat politics. Neera Tanden, she's a former White House official in charge of the Autopen, apparently, testified before Congress yesterday about the use of the Autopen during Biden's time in office, and she confirmed that she had authorization. What more are we learning this week, Gabrielle?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, she's confirming exactly what you and I, Emerald, have talked about well over a year ago. This is something I've
It's a
talked about
year
since
now
Biden's
because we're approaching
administration.
July. We first reported on this in
Yeah.
July of last year.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we've been on it. This is just confirmation of everything that we have been saying. I have it laid out in my Substack from start to finish exactly what the Autopen process looks like. But Neera Tanden is not. She was the staff secretary. It doesn't sound like a very sexy title, but staff secretary is revered as the nucleus. That is the term, the nucleus of the White House, the nucleus of presidential operations. The staff secretary handles from the drafting, from the idea to the drafting to involving general counsel, whether it's National Security Council or Department of Energy, whatever it may be, anything that requires a presidential signature at any moment for those 4 years, the staff secretary is the one that sees that process from start to finish. And at that finish line, they are the ones that put in writing ready for AP. Meaning Autopen. So for her to say at any point that she doesn't know when someone is telling her that it's Autopen ready is a complete lie. She's not the only one that served as staff secretary. Before her, it was Jessica Hertz, and then Stephanie Feldman followed her soon after. So those three, not just Neera Tanden, need to be present, especially Stephanie Feldman, because she was the very last staff secretary right before Biden's grand announcement that he was no longer running for president and having that signature written down. They all know exactly what's going on here. And if they don't want to answer, this is when I always call for GOP oversight, doing the work I hope that they're doing, is that this is all cataloged, required by standard operating procedures at the White House, because I had Autopen privileges, so I understand how this works, is that all of the stages of going and reaching that point of Autopen is Rolodexed on the White House servers. Okay. And there are two offices. The Office of Records Management handles the Autopen. It's in the Eisenhower Executive Building at the very top level. They have the keys. They have the key to the Autopen. And they also, I haven't mentioned this before, but they also have a sheet of which they catalog, and you have to sign for it, that you're utilizing the Autopen. So there is a whole process here that's absolutely captured. So you have Office of Records Management that holds on to the Autopen machinery. And then who brings the actual documentation up? It's the Office of the Executive Clerk. That's the office I worked in. So those two offices stay within every single administration and maintain that process historically. They do not divert from any other processes, despite any administration saying they want to do something one way or the other. They're the ones that hold the law down when it comes to that process. So the only involvement is the staff secretary giving the green light and telling the executive clerk to print out that final form, bring it up to the Office of Records Management. The staff, the executive clerk signs that form with the Office of Records Management, hands that paper over to Office of Records Management, watches them take the Autopen machine and turn it on, make that signature. The executive clerk takes that paper, brings it all the way down to the staff secretary and hands it to them in person. Then the staff secretary tells the executive clerk to make a press release so all know what Biden at that time was signing. And that's what happened. And I can confirm to you, and I've said this in my Substack, that President Biden, and it's not because I'm conservative, this is the darn truth. Both of those offices, like I mentioned, the clerks and the Office of Records Management, are there for all administrations. There's only been one executive clerk over the last 10, almost 13 years now, maybe at this point. That position, there's only been 10 of them in US history. So the 10th one is sitting there right now. And they know how this process works. There's no question about it. So if Neera Tanden wants to lie, if anyone wants to refuse to get on the stand, GOP oversight ought to tap, say, Will Scharf, the current staff secretary, to work with the White House IT department, another department I worked in before getting on over to staff sec, and pulling the original emails that literally catalog from step to step how something is signed with President Biden's signature. And again, President Biden being the one exercising the Autopen the most out of any president in US history. Again, not because I'm conservative, I'm sharing that. I'm sharing that because I worked in the White House, and I worked in the White House also during the Obama administration. Okay, so that is the truth. It's just a truth that people sometimes don't want to hear.
So are you saying Naratana possibly perjured herself before Congress yesterday?
Yes, that's what it appears to be. Now she can speak freely for herself, but her saying yes, I mean, she
She
couldn't
was under
deny
oath,
it
right?
anyway. Yeah, yeah. So there you have it. I mean, from
Hmm.
the time of what, October 2021 to May 2023, she's responsible for every signature that was exercised by President Biden, whether it was Autopen or not. That's on her. So, yeah, she has to answer for
Hmm.
that. And it's, again, all the evidence is there. Now, if the evidence is not there, which I highly doubt, again, because it's all required to be cataloged, that's the only way that you even get the function of Office of Records Management manning the
Yeah.
AutoPen and the documentation
Eh,
being transcribed. So
If it's not
that's
there,
it.
then we've got big problems. Then that's real
Exactly. And
telling.
that
If
is more
it's
incriminating than
not there, then
anything
we
else.
definitely have a crime.
One of the same people that told you that Grace is DNR and she can't help you.
Yes.
What was your response?
All of our response was that she's not DNR. Help her, save her. We were pleading, screaming, yelling. You got to picture what was happening. This didn't happen in a couple seconds, a couple minutes. It actually went on for almost 10 full minutes, trying to get someone to help her, save her, and no one stepped in that room. They literally stood outside Grace's room stationary. They would not move. There were nurses everywhere. Literally, I'd look out, the nurses station was in the middle of the hallway. There's two sides of the hallway. There's nurses everywhere. Across the hall, down the hall, left, right outside Grace's room. There's an armed guard posted at this time now. Nurse McGinnis is nowhere to be found. She vanishes as I'm trying to get help. We all are screaming, pleading, begging for somebody to come in there, and no one would do anything.
That is absolutely unfathomable to hear in the United States of America. That was the gut-wrenching testimony of the sister of Grace Shara, reliving the horrifying moment when the hospital, nurses, doctors, the entire staff refused to save her sister Grace. And one of the most important trials of our time, I would say, a Wisconsin jury rejected the wrongful death suit against the hospital for the 2021 death of Grace Shara. She was unvaccinated. She had Down syndrome, but her father says she was high functioning. The parents have stressed that this was medical misconduct, that is the reason that Grace died. Grace was admitted to St. Elizabeth Hospital on October 6, 2021. That was 5 days after she presented a positive test for COVID-19. Now, what is wild about this as well is that St. Elizabeth is a part of a group known as Ascension Medical Group, which bills itself as a faith-based hospital system. The real problem here is that she was wrongfully labeled do not resuscitate, or DNR in the case. It's not something that Scott Shara or anyone in his family told the doctors to label her. According to LifeSite News, she was given a cocktail of sedatives, anxiety drugs, and morphine as her health declined. Now, ultimately, she succumbed and died after the hospital refused, at the family's insistence, to help her, saying she was not DNR. And as you heard the sister say, they pled desperately with the staff to resuscitate Grace. Grace's father, Scott Shara, joins us now. Scott, this is just absolutely surreal. We were watching this case so closely. Our very own Christy Lee was giving regular updates to the Lindell TV audience for your trial because it has such major implications, right? This could have been a wonderful precedent-setting case for the tragedy that you have been through. There was some hope that this would have some positive impact. And listening, I don't understand how a jury could vote the way they did, listening to Grace's sister. What happened here?
Yeah, that's a great question. The jury verdict was last week, Thursday, so I've had several days to process what happened. And, so my perspective of what happened after talking with many people, including the attorneys, is that, well, first, I'll just say I was shocked by the verdict, but I'm not surprised. And I think that's important to understand the difference. So, why was I shocked? Well, from a technical perspective, the jury only deliberated 90 minutes in the case that lasted 1 day short of 3 weeks. So that was shocking. In fact, they really only deliberated about 15 to 20 minutes based on how the questions were coming back into the courtroom, which means they decided as soon as they got into the deliberation room. And so why am I shocked? Well, we had a better case. We had better witnesses, better experts. We had the truth on our side. Yet what they did, the jury decided in favor of the defense. And through their experts, so what happens in a trial like this is you bring in experts as the plaintiff and the defense brings in experts. We brought in 2 experts. They brought in 6. Our main expert, Dr. Burdine, has 46 years of experience, a Harvard grad. He did this trial because he was called to do it. He did not receive 1 penny personally. Everything that he billed for the trial was turned over to Texas Tech, where he's employed. And this is the first plaintiff's trial he's ever done. He's only done defense work in the past. That's how egregious he thought Grace's death was. So they brought in their experts, and the jury ended up siding with their experts. And what did they side with? Well, they decided with that when you are in a hospital, you are giving implied consent. So that means no informed consent is necessary once you're in a hospital. So consequently, the drugs that were used to euthanize Grace, Precedex, lorazepam, and morphine, they said no consent, no informed consent is necessary. And I had no idea these meds were given to Grace until we got the medical records. And then we saw that Grace was euthanized. So that's the first thing they agreed to. They secondarily agreed that even if they overdose somebody in a hospital, so Grace was overdosed on Precedex and lorazepam on October 7th. She was further overdosed on Precedex on October 8th, and they had to use resuscitation drugs to revive her. I was in the hospital with Grace at that time, and they never told me. I was oblivious to it until receiving the records. And of course, the third overdose is what killed Grace. And the jury decided in favor of the defense experts again, that even in an overdose, the hospital doctors have no responsibility to inform the family. And more importantly, the clip you played is about the illegal do not resuscitate order. And what their experts stated was that if you tell the hospital staff that you don't want to give a pre-authorization for a ventilator, that's called DNI, do not intubate. That's the same as DNR, do not resuscitate. That's what they sided with, and that they further sided with that a doctor can unilaterally place a DNR on a patient without consent, without a witness, without a signature, and without a DNR bracelet. And the jury decided in favor of the defense even on that claim. So this decision should scare anyone with ears to hear. Ultimately, why am I not surprised? Because one juror stood with us. That juror happened to be about my age, and the jury was young. They have been programmed since birth. And the one person who stood with us, that represents 8%. I think, Emerald, that 8% represents the real percentage of the population that hasn't been programmed to just do whatever the medical industrial establishment tells them to do. So anyway, that's my long-winded answer after I've processed this for a few days.
I that actually surprised me a little bit with the makeup of the jury, because I feel like, just anecdotally, in my environment that I'm in, I struggle more with, per se, the older members of my family trusting the medical system too much. And a lot of us younger folks have seen enough now that we're a little more skeptical. So, and we probably don't, we use the term boomer a lot, and I've been chastised for that, but it seems like my boomer family members are just much more trusting. So it kind of surprises me a little bit what you're telling me about the jury, but I can also see that interpretation, because yes, I mean, the young folks have attempted to indoctrinate young folks as to, medicine's going to fix you. You don't have to worry about this. You don't have to do this because, it's medicine and big pharma over, a holistic view of health. I agree with you. It's absolutely terrifying. This terrifies me. I was already terrified to go into a hospital because of things I've seen over the years. And in my family, we had a better outcome, though it was touch and go during the pandemic with a family member of mine. And it was very scary. And it's as if they were in prison and we had to get them out to get them proper care.
Correct.
So I know a little bit of what you've went through, but I think of this jury and I think sitting there, this is going to perhaps have implications for their own lives. One of them might enter the hospital one day and not be getting the care they feel they need or, would like to be resuscitated. And this could happen to them. I don't understand how sitting and listening, and I listened to as much of the testimony as I could, but there was a lot of great testimony. This is one of the most interesting trials that I've watched, and I didn't get to watch it all, but what I saw, I don't see how you could sit there and not think, well, gosh, what if me or my loved one went into the hospital? I would be afraid of this kind of care.
I agree. That's why I said I was shocked. I mean, because the testimony was really fantastic. And on top of that, the testimony of the doctor and nurse, the nurse reversed herself twice. First, she said she forgot to put the DNR bracelet on Grace, which if you just process that alone, if Grace would have had a DNR bracelet on, we could have stopped this because Jessica was in the room at that time. And she would have called me in a half a second and said, Dad, did you just make Grace DNR? But she said she forgot to put the DNR bracelet on. Well, then when she got back on the stand, she reversed that position and said, oh, we didn't have a DNR bracelet as part of our policy at that time. And similarly, she reversed her position on restraints. They had put Grace in restraints for Jessica, who was in the opening clip. She was told she had to leave to take a shower that morning. Well, while Jessica was gone for that just an hour and a half, they restrained Grace, put her in restraints because she wanted to get out of bed to go to the bathroom. And during that time, they increased Precedex to the maximum allowable dose, 40% higher than the 2 overdose reactions previously. So they set her up to die during that hour and a half window that Jessica was gone. Well, when the nurse was on the stand, first she said, well, Grace was never in restraints. And then when she came back, she reversed herself again. So, the jury, they're given instructions from the judge as to how to interpret evidence for credibility. And it's like they're completely blind to it, that, we never reversed our testimony. The doctor and nurse both reversed their testimony. And yet they must have seen the doctor and nurse as more credible than the family, which I get that from the programming because we've been programmed since birth to trust the white coat. They take the Hippocratic Oath. I mean, these are all lies that I know now. If I had to do this over again, of course, Grace would never go into the hospital. But even if she had to go in the hospital, I know what to do now. When I was there with her, I was a quasi advocate, quasi visitor. I would be a full-time advocate now. And what that means specifically. So people, of course, the question is, well, what should we do? Well, first, you should never go into a hospital unless it's an objective emergency. But if you need to go in, you of course have to have your paperwork, your power of attorney, your medical directives documents, but paperwork will never save you. What saves you is an advocate that understands their role as an advocate and has immediate online access to your chart, because they can do this to anybody, anytime. They have said they don't have to provide informed consent. So that means they can do any of this anytime. So an advocate who's awake, that can take control and insists on every single thing that they're going to do. They need to provide notice so that the implied consent doctrine can be applied and then have online access to the chart. That's the reality in our environment today. And that's why, I'm exceedingly happy that we were able to bring this case to a jury trial, and it was live streamed by CHD, because millions of people have a chance to wake up and save their life because of my daughter's death.
That was the biggest takeaway we learned from our personal experience as well, is that you must have an advocate that has access to your records and can fight for you. That is a takeaway that everyone in the audience should tuck in their pocket in the unfortunate case that you do have to go into the hospital. Scott, let's talk about the future. We had hoped that this would set a precedent for other wrongful death lawsuits that related to the pandemic. There were many people that were treated like Grace. There were many people who received medicines like remdesivir that ultimately was their demise. There's also the informed consent question as it relates to the COVID jabs, right? So your case was a very important one for many people. Are you going to appeal? Is there an appeal perhaps? And what do you see for the future of these lawsuits?
So the appeal is, so I'm going to answer that question in three parts. An appeal is possible. I had a long discussion with one of the attorneys this morning, and we laid out all the different options to appeal. Then, second of all, other cases. Personally, we did this case because God called us to do it. And I knew what I was getting into before doing it. This case was in the Antichrist legal system. It's designed to protect the medical industrial complex. I'll just give you a simple example. In Wisconsin, there's a $750,000 cap for medical malpractice by state statute. Grace was a legal adult. She was 19 years old, legal adult without a spouse or children. There's no loss of companionship claim. So it was a $750,000 cap lawsuit. It cost over $1 million in legal fees to do this lawsuit. So it would, from a business perspective, I'm a businessman. It's the dumbest decision you'd ever make business-wise. But when God calls you to do something, you do it. And I would tell anybody that's interested in filing a lawsuit, you've got to be all in. This was out of all the things I've done in my lifetime, this was the single most important and the most intense and time-consuming and all-consuming thing I've ever done. So I would not encourage people to file a lawsuit. We did this because we were called to do it. And Grace's death has not been in vain because the lawsuit was live streamed. So then the third, I said I'm going to give you a three-part answer. The third part to my answer is there's a lot bigger agenda going on here. And that's where what I was researching, my research got put on hold for about 3 months solidly with this trial. The last 3 months was just all trial. And the research I'm working on, it's titled Escaping Babylon. This is a spiritual war. And from a macro view, we are heading toward a one world government, a one world religion. And this is a battle for souls, Satan against God. And this is the most important thing that I could share is that the only answer to this, we're not going to get an answer to fixing this system by having a new king, a new HHS secretary. The only answer to this is to recognize we've all participated in these systems. We did because our human nature, our sinful nature is lazy. We don't want to be accountable, and we've systematically turned our rights over to the state. We've all done it. So that means the only answer to this, once you come to grips with it, is to acknowledge and then of your part in it. And the only one who can fix that, and he will, once we repent, is our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Scott, your faith is inspiring. You're right. It's a spiritual battle, and you and your entire family will continue to be in our prayers. Thank you for joining us today now that you've had the time to, as you said, absorb the verdict and share your takeaways from the trial. I agree. It was a very important trial still, even if it didn't go the way we all had hoped. Thank you so much, Scott. Give our best to your family.
Thanks for having me, Emerald. God bless you.
A bit of news that didn't get the attention it might have deserved with the Iran strikes happening is that President Trump's Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. named a group of critics to head up a CDC committee known as ACIP, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Policy that oversees vaccinations for the country. Now, despite claims from the corporate press that RFK put anti-vaxxers on the panel, RFK pushed back in a recent congressional testimony. Listen.
And what we're going to do, the new ACIP panel, which has great scientists on them, none of them are anti-vax. The leading statistician alive in the world today, Martin Kulldorff, is the chair of that committee. The inventor of the mRNA vaccine, Robert Malone, is co-chairing the committee. We have scientists, immunologists, toxicologists, every kind of medical discipline that you would want on that committee, and we're going to have gold standard science now and good recommendations.
The gentleman's time.
Now, the committee is actually in day 2 of its annual meeting in Atlanta, Georgia. We've been keeping an eye on that. And as Kennedy noted, one of the key members of the ACIP panel, the co-chair, in fact, appointed by RFK, is our friend Dr. Robert Malone. Now, here he is in the recent meeting of this group, yesterday actually, taking them to task for allowing mRNA COVID-19 vaccines to be forced upon the population during the pandemic.
There are some data suggesting that there may have been significant lot-to-lot variability in terms of adverse event profiles. If there was lot-to-lot variability, it might make it very challenging to identify clusters of AEs that might be associated with particular lots.
And there's more MAHA news. RFK also took aim yesterday at Gavi. That's the global vaccine alliance that has been trying to force all manner of vaccinations upon we the people for years. Here's what RFK said about that.
A major concern that I share with the president is how the World Health Organization and Gavi partnered together during the COVID-19 pandemic to recommend best practices for social media companies to silence dissenting views, to stifle free speech and legitimate questions during that period. In addition, Gavi has continued to make questionable recommendations encouraging pregnant women to receive COVID-19 vaccines. Having said that, there's much that I admire about Gavi, especially its commitment to making medicine affordable to all the world's people. Gavi has done that part of its job very well. Unfortunately, in its zeal to promote universal vaccination, it has neglected the key issue of vaccine safety. When vaccine safety issues have come before Gavi, Gavi has treated them not as a patient health problem, but as a public relations problem.
Joining us now to talk more about this developing news is Dr. Mary Bowden. She's a world leader in patient rights and one of the key voices fighting for our medical freedoms in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Bowden, thank you so much for being with us today. There's lots to go through. Of course, ACIP continues to meet in Atlanta, Georgia, as we speak. It was interesting to me, though, to hear Secretary Kennedy, and correct me if I'm wrong, talk about Gavi, which is great to, take action against them. I thought he's a bit too generous in speaking about Gavi myself. But there's also the statement he made about the recommending the vaccines for pregnant women. That came up in the ACIP board meeting yesterday, and it sounds like to me, and maybe I'm wrong, that they left those in the guidance for pregnant women. So that kind of contradicts what, I don't know, where are we on that? Because we keep getting conflicting messages.
I agree. The issue with the pregnant women is very muddy because there's that paper that Makary published in the New England Journal of Medicine where they noted pregnancy as a risk factor and a reason to get the COVID shots. But then when they made these changes to the CDC recommendations, pregnancy was not included as one of these, okay, you need to get an annual booster. Yesterday's meeting was interesting because they didn't vote. It did demonstrate that there was a change in regime. We saw basically the old guard versus the new guard. We had the CDC work group. So that's the people that came in with all their data, and that's based on all these, the previous dogma concerning the COVID shots. And then we had the new guard. We had the new members of ACIP basically challenging the work group. So that was gave me a glimmer of hope. But I think we can all agree that maybe it wasn't quite enough. And they didn't vote. So I don't know. I think we're just, they're trying to dip their toes into this and ease into it. whereas we all want a wrecking ball and getting a little bit frustrated.
Okay, let me ask you about the voting part, because there's been some suggestion to me that perhaps this should not actually be a voting board anyway, that it should give advice, guidance, consult the secretary, the head of the CDC, and they ultimately make the decision. Could this perhaps have been laying the groundwork for the change in purpose of this board or the way it functions?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. And, the other committee, the VRBAC committee, from what I can tell, they haven't changed anybody on that committee. And those are the people that actually, I think they have more influence on which vaccines get approved and which don't. And that one has sort of stayed in the back burner. Sarah Meyer, who presented yesterday on behalf of VAERS and safety data for CDC, she's on that committee. I haven't seen any changeover there, which is interesting. So yeah, maybe this is all just fluff to appease the medical freedom people who are upset. But we'll see.
Yes, we will see. Secretary Kennedy, of course, was on the Hill 2 days ago in a wide-ranging testimony, as touched on the missing kids, which we highlighted yesterday. It also talked about, he had some very supportive statements to say about wearables. Now, I bring this up to you. I don't have the soundbite right now, but I bring this up to you specifically because you have highlighted the business interest of Casey and Callie Means. And we know a lot of this because of the article you put out, right? What their business interest is. Some of that for Casey Means is, because she's nominated to be Surgeon General, is wearable technology, wearable medical technology, data collection. So that immediately made a lot of people stand up and say, hey, what did you make of RFK's comments about the wearables?
Yeah, and I actually have to admit, I haven't fully watched that, but I've just seen the buzz about it on X. But the first thing that came to my mind was, well, hold on, conflicts of interest, because it may not be a pharmaceutical product or a vaccine, but it's still something, a significant conflicts of interest. And Callie too, because Callie eases all these companies that have wearables. He helps them get special tax saving treatment. There's a company called 8 Sleep, which I wrote about, which is a $4,000 bed that you can get a tax break on because it monitors your sleep data. And the government is basically subsidizing these very expensive beds, and Callie helps make that happen. So it's not just Casey, it's Callie too. And it's a little bit hypocritical. I mean, why can't they just find somebody that is a doctor and doesn't have, some sort of huge financial benefit to gain from being in a position of power?
It seems like that's kind of hard to find for some reason. Dr. Bowden, you're obviously one of those doctors. I think you should have been on the short list. They can be found. All they have to do is watch my show. In all honesty, I have several candidates for them. I know when you generally look around and you're not doing a targeted search, it's hard to find, but they could have just watched my show, Dr. Bowden, and found some good candidates for that instead of someone who does have such conflicts of interest.
Yeah, well, I'm not really interested in the job because I don't want to be muzzled, but there are plenty of other options. Kelly Victory, Joseph Ladapo, Peter McCullough, Kirk Milhone would be wonderful. There are lots of options. But yeah, it shouldn't be this difficult to find somebody that's got a lot of substance and style. As I've said before, Casey, in my opinion, is more style over substance.
All right, Dr. Bowden, I have to ask you, I'm being told by sources within Health and Human Services, because, they are very concerned, and I know you probably had people reaching out to you. They're concerned about the criticisms in the MAHA movement, and they say, just wait, right? They keep pointing to good things that are coming, like RFK going after Gavi, which we did highlight at the top of this segment. And I'm being told that people actively watch this show while it's on. And sometimes I get text messages while I'm in the middle of my show. They're saying that Kennedy has not lost his zeal for the vaccine issue one iota. Do you believe that's
Oh, wait,
true?
I got that same text this morning. It's probably the same person. That word for word.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So there's obviously some concern within Health and Human Services, but the way to remedy that is to just start delivering on what was promised during the campaign, correct?
Right. And I'm sorry, but this has been an emergency for quite a long time. I mean, it sounded like from that meeting the vaccine uptake is actually going up, which is very alarming. It's still low, but it's going up. And my theory on these new parameters is they're going to scare people into taking the vaccine. And I think that it's sort of this unexpected but benefit to these new parameters. They make everybody think that fewer people will get them, but I can just see the doctor saying, well, you're high risk, and the CDC says that you really need to get a shot. And for conditions that really would not make you at higher risk from dying from COVID, like ADHD for kids would be considered a comorbidity and a reason to get the COVID shot. It's an emergency. I've never seen anything like it with any other product on the market. People's lives have been destroyed. People have died. There were 6 parents in my kids' high school that have died suddenly in the last few months. And these are parents of teenagers, so they're presumably in their 50s. They're not elderly by any means. It's just really, I just don't know what it's going to take. But we just have to keep fighting.
Every day that goes by that these are not pulled from the market is another day lost. Something that hit me as you were talking as well, and we had previously been talking about the conflicts of interest of the Means siblings. The left, the corporate media, is not hounding them over their business interests. In any other situation, because they are Trump administration officials, they would be getting hammered, but I don't see so much media attention. Maybe I've just missed it.
Well, Vanity Fair, because I don't know if you saw that, I got in a fight with the reporter, Catherine Ebon. She reached out to me because she did a deep dive into them. And, I gave her the information I had. And then she disparaged me by saying that,
of course,
linking me to horse dealer. So, but I mean, there is some backlash on them from the other side, but that is an excellent point. You would think it would be New York Times material or Washington Post material.
The White House press corps asking over and over again of the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt why they have not divested themselves from their companies. Why are they still allowed to be in business? I mean, the government, I've seen it time and time again, and yet with these siblings, it's not, obviously it doesn't bother the corporate press that much. Interestingly, Vanity Fair was one of the outlets that went after me the most when I was talking about the origins of COVID, and they painted me as all kinds of crazy. And they actually stationed a reporter outside of my stand-up location on the north lawn of the White House. They watched me every day. So it's not surprising they tried to disparage you over ivermectin.
Well, she corrected it because I went crazy on her on X. So she actually took it out, which was a small victory. Was Catherine Ebon the one that went after you?
No, it was someone else, but it's funny. I don't think they've ever corrected it. I should look back because even the intelligence community now agrees with my reporting on the true origins of the pandemic, or, that it came out of that lab in Wuhan, at least as it leaked. That you can debate the true origins, right? But as for how the pandemic really got going, so I could probably ask for an after the fact retraction now. Dr. Mary Bowden, I do want to leave on some good news. There's been some wins. You've been pushing for the states to allow ivermectin to be sold over the counter. You've been trying to make it more available to more Americans more easily. And there continues to be states added pretty regularly to that list. Yes, with one just recently.
Louisiana is on the brink. They're just waiting for Governor Landry to sign it. So that would be the 4th state in the country to allow ivermectin to be sold over the counter. Texas came close, but of course the bill died before it could get a vote, which is not surprising. There were 17 states that had bills. Looks like 4 of them are going to pass. North Carolina is a possible 5th, and then we'll see. But honestly, the FDA just needs to make it over the counter. They need to issue a statement stating that it is for humans. It's very safe. It's a very easy thing that the FDA could do, because people are going to the feed store to get their medication, which from what I can tell is probably safe. I'm not seeing a lot of issues, but this is America. We should be able to get our medications from a pharmacy and not have to resort to taking animal medications.
Hear, hear. We have a long list of items we need to see from HHS, FDA, and CDC, and we will be more than happy to applaud their successes when they have them. And we do highlight when they do great things, but we're also keeping our eye on the ball because we were promised a total change and MAHA. We were promised making America healthy again. And that includes not just food, it includes taking on Big Pharma as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Mary Bowden. It's good to see you.
You too, Emerald.